Patrick, welcome back to my living room.
Thanks. This is the Boardroom bus studio all of a sudden.
Indeed it is. We're pulling this off because the wife's out of town. So, Patrick, while I'm sitting here, you realize this is offensive in the Middle East? To sit with my shoe, the bottom of my shoe facing you?
Wow, is this intentional?
No.
This is subconscious.
It's just the way I say it. So Patrick, let's talk a little bit about what we've got on tap. So over the last 10 days, we had Dylan and the crew down here in San Juan. We interviewed a whole host of clients, former clients. I had a due diligence session down here. We had Thompson Street Capital Partners come in. So we got a lot of great interviews. You know, one that was particularly exciting for me is Jared Borg's discussion. So Jared Borg just recapitalized Point and Green Pest Services. Large transaction, the largest pest transaction for Thompson Street Capital Partners, which will be their residential platform for Pesco Holdings. And I think it's a super exciting deal because Jared's going to stick around. He's got a stake in the outcome there. He's going to run that business. On the residential side, Jay Keating, the CEO, came down. Jared was just so full of energy. And you know, I think my only regret from that entire week was not getting Jody, his wife, behind the camera. In addition to Jared, let's see, who else did we have? Yesterday,
I was going to say, that's Point specifically in the Midwest, right? Chicago Metro.
We should clarify that. Yeah,
I think there's a Jacob Borg. There might be a brother that has a Point.
That's right. So it's not the business in the Pacific Northwest. It's the Midwest, and then of course the East Coast, Virginia.
Jacob is still operating.
That's right.
A thriving business, I think, is what your press release says.
Yes, that's correct. What else we got?
David Clark.
That's right.
Came in.
So we did Clark. The Clark transaction closed on December 31st. It's a 225, 230 man business in the Carolinas, largely in South Carolina, runs a little bit in North Carolina and in Georgia, but that was a platform acquisition for Anticimex. And so what I believe is going to happen is ultimately that'll be combined with Mike Rogers' business in the Carolinas, and that'll become one operation. I don't know how they'll brand it. My guess is they might brand it as Clark. I don't know. Clark's a bigger business down there. David came down, spent some time at Dorado. He brought his wife down. Great time. Looking forward to getting that discussion published. What else?
Frank and Cindy Miller.
Frank and Cindy.
Got to hang out with them yesterday.
Frank and Cindy Frank has been in the pest control industry for 132 years. He's a former military guy, and he's really a fun dude. He and Cindy, they came down yesterday. No, they were down here 2 days ago. They were actually fired by their children almost immediately prior to us recording this episode. So we had a great discussion with them.
They are looking for a job.
Yes, they are. And we'll hear about that.
And then Byron Gifford, right?
Byron, yes. Byron and his wife arrived last night. We'll be chatting with them tomorrow. Byron is a partner in Evergreen out on the West Coast. That transaction closed, if I remember correctly, at the very end of last year, very end of 2021. So he's down here for some fun in the sun. He's probably in the gym right now, prepping for a full day with the Mecs, and we'll sit down with him tomorrow.
So this morning, I know Rentokil had their earnings call.
When you think about what's gone on in 2021, right? In 2020, you had a lot of revenue in the pest control industry come in from disinfectant during COVID, right? So that's rolling off. You've got a lot of intense pressures on wage as well as commodities like fuel prices and materials. So that's putting pressure on margins across the board. Pest control is relatively insulated from that because a lot of these guys are fully hedged on the commodity side. But there was some pressure on Rentokil. Overall, though, I think it's we saw this morning when London opened, Rentokil was down 9%. I think they've probably chewed back half those losses by now. It looks to me like that transaction is going to continue to move forward. I know that Rentokil and Terminix applied for antitrust review with the FTC on January 10th. And so usually you have about a 60-day period, and after that 60-day period, the FTC can come back and ask for clarifications. They might send over a document with questions. So around March 10th or so, we'll probably have better clarity on what's happening.
Ripple effect, right? Rentokil was down. I think you mentioned 9%. I saw 4%, 5%. It's moving target today. But as you start scrolling through the other tickers, you saw Rollins was down.
Yeah.
Then Terminix is down.
Yeah.
And there's an adjustment on the estimate. But right, if Rentokil goes down, isn't the Terminix deal go down in value?
Yeah, I mean, look, because the extreme majority of that transaction, the Terminix acquisition price is pegged to Rentokil's stock price. Obviously, as Rentokil trades down in the market, Terminix becomes less valuable. And so that will change. I think Morgan Stanley had originally put a price target of 52 per share on Terminix. I think they revised downward this morning to 48. Again, like I said a couple of weeks ago when we talked, I'm less concerned about regulatory risk at this point. I think if I'm concerned about anything with regard to that deal is effectively where equity valuations are going in this market. I mean, look, as we record this, we've got WTI oil. I feel like every time we do a buzz episode, like oil's going up, right? It was $70 a barrel, then 85, then 95. Now it's, I think this morning when I got up, it had reached 113 a barrel for WTI oil. Obviously, a lot of that is related to the risk in Ukraine. But I also think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that governments around the world are lambasting the oil industry. These guys are investing less. There's this whole push for electric vehicles. I just think we're going to, I mean, you know, I've been an energy bull for the last 24 months, and I remain an energy bull.
In a gold bull?
In low growth. I mean, I think when I think about where we are, so what is it today? March 3rd. We're recording this on March 3rd in Puerto Rico. And when I look at the market, I say to myself, well, we will certainly not be, and I'm talking about pest, I'm talking about every market. I'm talking about the US broad equity markets, but also pest control. I think we're going to be in a very different position in December 31st this year than where we are in March. I mean, there's just increasingly more risks on the horizon. We've been talking about that, and we're starting to see the dynamics in the industry change. Certainly, Terminix is not doing deals now. They might buy a small company here or there, but for the most part, they're not doing deals. Rentokil remains extremely active in rest of world, so in Europe, Asia, and other areas, both on pest and hygiene. I think they're working on 9 transactions now in the United States, all relatively small. So it is a very different, 2022 is a very different year from 2021. And when I say I think it's going to be very different now versus, the end of the year, I think the only thing that helps companies like Jared's business, Point, which was doing more than $20 million in revenue, David Clark's business, Clark's, that was doing more than $20 million in revenue, is scarcity. You remember that was the theme of 2021 when we started. What was it? It was an aftermath. I think we did in Unhinged in April. So the scarcity theme continues, and that props up asset prices. And of course, we see, we had Thompson Street down here last week. We had a client down here. We did some diligence meetings. We're going to start doing as much DD from Puerto Rico as we possibly can. We haven't had to twist the arms of the acquirers to come down.
It's hard to say no to this.
That's right. But look, it is going to be a very different year where if I look at the U.S. economy, I mean, finally, the Atlanta Fed just revised down growth to effectively 0 for 2022. So we've got a Fed tightening into a decelerating economy. It's going to be different. So if you are thinking about selling, if you are on the fence, you need to accelerate plans. And I think this is very consistent with the theme that we presented at Supernova last June and July.
So I want to ask about the Terminix Rentokil. It's interesting. So Terminix is not doing M&A. Rentokil is, but not domestically. Mm-hmm. But also, I'm also hearing you say like you've never had a busier first quarter, and your team is like the Mexican. They're all like, hey, we're running redlining on this. So what does it look like as far as the market right now?
All the other acquirers are out there hitting on all cylinders. We have a lot of private equity support in this market. That's kind of, I think, picking up for some of the loss of Terminix / Rentokil. I wouldn't say Rentokil's not doing anything. Andy Ransom runs an M&A machine over there, and in 2021 they basically did a deal a week, pretty almost right in line with almost what Potomac did in 2021. The current buyers in the market, of course, are keeping us busy, and we're starting to see now. For the last 2 years, we had a lot of these tax concerns, right? We had the general election in 2020. Then in 2021, we had the Build Back Better, that sort of legislation that scared everyone. Now it's all about valuation. And I think when you look at Rentokil and Rollins and Terminix, I mean, I don't have a chart in front of me, but I think Rollins is probably down between 22 and 30% from its November high in November 2021. So when you start to see the public equity markets roll over, it really makes people start to think. And in addition to Rentokil and Terminix, in addition to the Fed hiking in a rapidly decelerating U.S. market, you also have changes at Anticimex. I don't even know if this is public yet, but we'll talk about it. Jarl stepped down as CEO of Anticimex last week. So right now, what are we now? We're on Thursday? Yep. So yeah, just last week he stepped down. He'll become chairman of the board of Anticimex. They brought in an executive from Ericsson who will run Anticimex. So it's an end of an era with him. I mean, he was very aggressive on the M&A front. I'm not sure what the new guy's going to be like. Our dear friend Ola, head of M&A in Stockholm, is now gone. So Monday was his last day. So he's out. And of course, for those of you who don't pay attention to Anticimex, they had a large recapitalization at the end of last year. Folks got some money. They kicked that business to a longer term fund. And now it's like, hey, it's going to take another 5 to 7 years in order to get liquid on an investment there. I think these guys are looking around. As well as we had our former co-host, right? I don't know what episode that was. It was
24.
24. Of course, you know the episode. So co-host David Billingsly, former president of American Pest Control in the Mid-Atlantic, and most recently Anticimex's head of the West Coast in the United States, is now since departed. Monday was his last day. I think David is a very, very sharp guy. David is a very honest, just great operator. I think David's going to have some very interesting things to do. So if any of you guys know David, reach out to him. Any of you could use his expertise. He's a good guy to talk to.
Yeah. Well, so Frank and Cindy Miller and David Billingsley are looking for jobs right now, if you know anyone.
Yeah.
But what does that signal with AX, right? Like, it's y'all staying. It's not like Jarl's going by the wayside. He's staying on as chairman of the board. So Ola's going. I mean, Bill Talon, right, is COO. I don't know if we've talked about that, but moved up from Turner president. So
yeah.
There is this like kind of restructuring. I still don't know why.
In my mind, Brian Alexson has been on the job for about a year. We interviewed him last summer in Atlanta.
That's right.
So Brian is relatively new to the role. I think when he looks at the U.S. organization, he probably disagrees with some of the ways that Michael Vigne ran it. Michael's a guy like me. He's a finance guy. He's an M&A guy. He came in, set up the North American business, made a lot of acquisitions, bought a lot of premium assets. But every chief of state, so to speak, is going to have a different idea how they want to organize a business. So I think he's going to make changes. So he changed the West Coast operations. He'll probably change some things on the East Coast. I think he got rid of Dennis Doobie, president of Modern. Brought Bill Talon up. He's COO now. So congratulations to Bill. And I don't know what this ultimately means, but if I do make it to London next week, I'm going to swing through Stockholm just to see what's going on. I'm going to have a chit chat. I'd love to get an outgoing discussion with Jarl. If I can record it for the buzz, I'll do it. But I'm going to try to swing through there if I can.
Cool. So going back, I might be chasing this private equity. So Thompson Street was here, right? Do the phones continue to ring with new private equity shop every day, or what's that look like?
I would say that yes. So a lot of the private equity firms are not going to be able to. They're not going to pay to play in this industry. But there are some that are out there doing it. I mean, you and I, when we talked a few weeks ago, remember we said we started a process. And I think there were 14, maybe 10, 14, I don't remember. There were around a dozen private equity firms and a handful of strategics. So next week, the indications of interest are due on that transaction. And it will be maybe two strategics bidding on that, but it'll be largely private equity. And that'll probably be a private equity platform similar to what Jared and Kyle did at Point, partnering up with Pesco. So this one will likely be a private equity partnership. And what we're trying to do here with private equity is when I look at the private equity space, so people look around this industry and they see a few of these companies that have partnered with private equity. There's a spectrum. You've got everything from venture capital on one end of the spectrum. You've got value investors in private equity. You've got aggressive growth equity investors in private equity. You've got every different private equity firm or every class of private equity firms is focusing on a different sort of transaction. Thus far, the private equity firms outside of Imperial, Thompson, and EQT that owns Certus, Anticimex, and Pesco.
Yeah.
These private equity firms have really been not so much growth capital, but kind of knocking out shareholders. I don't see that some of the other firms that are in the space are going to be as aggressive in growing their investment. I see Thompson Street is going to be particularly focused on, they're going to be aggressive, right? They're going to really try to grow the hell out of that business. I don't run into Certus as much. I think, we put 60 some odd deals in a recent spread, and maybe one or two of them were Certus. I think we did one deal with Certus last year out of 40 something.
Yeah, the bug guys.
That's right. So we're not doing as many Certus deals. I haven't seen them as active, but the Mexican was just with Mike Givlin last week, probably disappointing him greatly by showing up in my stead. Well, it's true. Sure, he looked and said, "Oh shit, here's the Mexican."
What? I would run away too. Okay. I'm thinking about limited capacity. As I think taxes were front of mind coming out of 21. And you spoke about limited capacity. Like Rentokil could do 3 deals a month, if I remember right.
That's about right. Yep.
And now it's like there was a definite constraint, like a calendar year, December 31st, only so many deals can get done.
Correct.
This is different. Like we don't know from now to the end of the year, kind of this unknown of where the market's going to look like. I didn't know this about the federal bank saying, hey, there's going to be no growth this year. We've got somewhere between 2 to 5 interest rate hikes, not knowing if we're creeping up at 25 or 50 basis points. Yep. Do you like that?
I like that.
All right. So what does it look like with capacity? I'm thinking about, hey, $5 million guys like, hey, do I need to do something now? Do I need to, right, what's the capacity of the buyers?
Well, so here's the way that I look at it, and I can only use, every market cycle is different, but I can only think about things from a historical contextual perspective. So I graduated university in 1999, and I started to work in bulge bracket investment banking. And I was out in California in the tech group. And we were taking a company public every other week. Frank Quattrone was one in that group. And we were the most active bulge bracket investment bank in the technology space in the late 90s, right? These guys were effectively printing money. And then we all know there was a dot-com bust. Another massive down cycle was the great financial crisis, effectively 2007 through 2011 or so. When I think about what happens in M&A and consolidating markets, and I can even go back, I have direct experience in those booms and busts. But, the government staffing, IT services, all these different consolidation booms going back into the 80s and 90s are well documented. And what I tend to see is when you have a consolidation boom, acquirers come in, you get publicly traded strategics like Rollins, Rentokil. Mm-hmm. You get private equity-backed amalgamators and consolidators. And what ends up happening is as there's a run-up, everyone's buying everything. And these investors tend to be indiscriminate. It just runs up the price of everything. And you end up in a position where there's almost a melt up or a blow off top. It's very similar to the public equity markets. And we saw that in Q4 of 2021. So I think that I'm going to go out on a limb, and I said 2018 was the height for that market cycle. Everything started to roll over in 2019, and then of course we had COVID, and so we had this massive fiscal monetary stimulus. Now when I look at it, I say to myself, okay, it is likely, not 100% certain, but is likely that Q4 of 2021 was the height from a valuation perspective in this industry. Now, you get this big run up, investors are indiscriminate, meaning they're buying everything, big, small, it doesn't matter. Then you start to get scarcity. So quality assets become scarcer and scarcer. Those will continue to hold from a valuation perspective, but as acquirers become more and more selective, they're not willing to pay what they used to pay a year ago for businesses that they don't view as scarce assets or premium assets. So what ends up happening is you start to see a bifurcated market, and you'll start to see acquirers continue to pay. When I look at valuation, you've got average multiples, right? You've got medium multiples. You've got kind of the mode. You've got the distribution. And so what you have to think about, like I always thought to myself, median and average multiples don't make a lot of sense because it depends on how the bell curve is shaped and how the distribution is shaped. And so when I look at it, I say to myself, what I am seeing now in Q1 of 2022 is that we're starting to see a bifurcated market. We're seeing some of the large strategics decelerate. Rentokil and Terminix would be great examples. We are seeing private equity step in. Private equity doesn't have the same network or platform that the strategics have. They can't be as indiscriminate, right? They can't go to like the middle of Wyoming or somewhere in Arkansas and just buy things that Rentokil and Terminix and these companies can. So we're starting to see, and I always look at the margin, what's happening on the margin. And so we're seeing valuations decline on the margins for businesses that aren't as scarce. My gut tells me we'll continue to see tremendous valuation upward pressure on scarce assets. I'm wondering, again, who the hell knows what's going to happen? I mean, we are really in a situation where when I look at the economy, we're going to have a $1.3 trillion runoff in fiscal spending. So when you comp Q2 of 21 with Q2 of 22, there is a $1.3 trillion government spending hole, right? That's when all those checks went out last year in February and March, and it really started to hit the economy in March and April. Now, when we look at publicly traded companies, when we look at earnings, we are comparing year over year growth, both on the revenue and the earnings side. So we've got kind of almost this earnings cliff that we're going to start to hit. And we're going to hit this earnings cliff at a time where we've got oil at decade high, where we've got commodity prices ramping. Wheat ramped 10% overnight. Now, I know there's some Ukraine-Russia effects here, but we're hiking into a decelerating economy with tremendous margin pressure, which I think could potentially impact things. So I think if I'm an owner of a rare, scarce, and valuable asset, I'm not extremely concerned right now, but I'm starting to take notice. If I have a less valuable asset, not as scarce, if my business is not highly differentiated in its marketplace, then I am definitely selling less now in March of 22 than I sold for in December of 2021. That's a fact.
Okay. So you said a lot. Let me try to unpack some of it or ask you questions.
Yeah.
I know going into Supernova, one of the graphs comes to mind is the multiple expansion. And and kind of what you said, it wasn't just an uptick. It wasn't just an uptick. It was also this vertical of, hey, from 1 to 3. I mean, got into 4, got higher. I know you just hit some record deals. I mean, they may or may not have been here in San Juan recently, but I mean, you got some killer deals. Can you, going to Seinfeld and the opposite, if that's what the run-up was, are we going to see, are you calling this multiple contraction?
So I haven't really thought about it from that perspective. The word multiple expansion is thrown around in a lot of different ways. So let's actually define what we mean by that. it can be defined very simply as an increase in transaction multiples. And a transaction multiple is, we could say enterprise value, or the value of the whole firm, to sales. We can say enterprise value to whatever metric we want to use for cash flow, right? EBIT, EBITDA, EBITDA, so on and so forth. So it can be very simply defined as an increase in transaction multiples. When I think about multiple expansion, I think about how transaction statistics change from the short end or the low end of the market. And what I mean by that, quite frankly, is just the small companies, right? Okay. All the way up to the big ones. And you'll start to see a spread when a basic example is I own a $5 million business and it does $1 million per year in EBITDA. I might sell at 13 times EBITDA in this market. Now, had I grown that business to 22 million and running the same sort of margins, instead of selling at 13 times, I might have been an 18 or 19 times business. So that spread between 12 and 13 times and 18 and 19 times, that's the expansion zone. In theory, we always talked about, like we did aftermath during COVID. We've done a lot of these presentations, and as market multiples increase, you try to get the arbitrage play, right? You try to go out and say, okay, I'm going to buy these smaller businesses. I'm going to buy for $1 and sell them for $3. I'm going to buy for $1 and sell them for $4. Mm-hmm. Guys, in 2021, it was almost like I'm going to buy for $1 and sell them for $5, right? I mean, the multiples were just so high then. So I would say that we will see probably when you look at the market, I think the best way to look at it is that you're not going to see this bell curve where you've got the big companies on the high end getting really high multiples, the majority of them in the middle, and the smaller companies trailing off. I think you'll see more of a barbell. I think you'll see more start to cluster on kind of the lower end. The median and mean might stay the same. It just might be the distribution's different. Mm-hmm. And that's why averages and medians are dangerous, because it doesn't really tell the whole story of dispersion. And so that's the way I look at it.
That makes sense. Makes sense. All right, now let's define scarce asset then. So I could look, hey, look at me, I'm scarce, or I'm one of a kind, I'm whatever. But like from the acquirer standpoint, what do they have eyes for? Or in terms of all the way back to Mike Givlin's interview, you said you only sell the good crack. Mm-hmm. Like what are they salivating over?
Well, I mean, let's face it, a lot of companies in the market suck, right? Like a lot of these pest control companies out, I would say probably half the market is shit, right? You've got guys who are doing crap services, not taking care of their people, not taking care of their customers. So let's get rid of all those guys. I would say that you got the other half of the market, and now you've got to say, okay, what do these acquirers want? And I don't think that's changed. Mm-hmm. I think there's always a search for a platform with resources and capabilities. In a couple of weeks, I don't know when we'll get around to publishing it, but Jared Borg brought the noise to the buzz. He was very high energy, and if you listen to him, I think we chatted for an hour. If you listen to Jared Borg, you will understand how a guy took a business from basically nothing and turned it into something that has very unique resources and capabilities. I think that's the best expose. Now, some other interviews are more fun, right? They're storytelling and so on and so forth, whereas we got down to brass tacks with Jared and we talked about it. So he and Kyle did a phenomenal job. His brother Jacob and Gabe out on the West Coast are doing very similar things with that business. Now, these guys come from old school door to door. They don't do a whole lot of it anymore. Jared basically does none. I think this year he's doing 0. But they've really used technology. They've also used their brain, right? It's not just bringing in technology. It's actually thinking about how we're going to organize this business. So it's hard to do that when you run a $5 million business, right? And you'll hear Jared's story. A lot of it was trial and error, and they were able to build it out over time. But really, the best way, and it takes years to do that. So if you've got a business now where you've built out some special sauce, that's valuable. So you've got resources and capabilities. Again, we've talked about this for years now in the buzz. You've got scale, right? Is your business scaling? Is it profitable? Are you doing 20+% adjusted EBITDA? Are you 25%? So is your profitability there? Is your recurring revenue right? Are you priced right out in the market? Again, you got the Walmarts of pest control, and then you got the guys who are getting priced. So Those things haven't changed. The market is still extremely competitive. There are going to be companies in certain areas of the country that will find no buyers or one buyer, whereas over the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a plethora of buyers, right? I think there's going to be, if Terminix isn't buying and Rentokil's too occupied, and you've got Anticimex and you've got Rollins, and Rollins is not in a market or interested in it, and Anticimex is not in the center of the country, and now you're kind of running out of buyers. And when you find only a private equity or a small handful of them willing to bid on it, that's the difference between selling at 15 times EBITDA and 10 times, right? It's 5 turns of EBITDA. That's a full turn on revenue. That takes you from maybe 3.5 times revenue down to 2.5 or 3 to 2. That's where we are right now seeing issues. So I am now, for the first time in years, starting to see issues with not getting sufficient bidders at the table in certain markets. Project Black Bear, Mr. Baldwin. You and your partner, Bobby, were very, very fortunate, right? We woke up one day and you guys said, hey, if we can hit a number, let's do it. It was last April, right? Is that when we kind of started this, roughly?
Yeah.
So we updated your valuation, dusted that bad boy off from a decade ago. Numbers were dramatically different, but we put that together. We got out in the market. You closed it August 9th. There you go. I figured you'd remember the date. So as you'll recall, in that process, we had every strategic, right? We had some private equity firms. You ultimately sold to Terminix. Rentokil, I think it was very difficult for you to not sell to Rentokil because I think you and Bobby both loved Rentokil. I think when it ultimately came down to it, not only from a financial perspective, but a fit and feel. I remember you two really liked Rentokil. So it was a 2-week agonizing process saying, okay, in this specific situation, Terminix made the right sense. But I mean, just think about it in light of what we're talking about right now. If we were in the market with Black Bear, it is very likely that Rentokil would be not at the table. I can almost assure you that Terminix would not be at the table. So your two most important bidders would be gone. Now, the good news is we had other bidders in that process, but you can see how being in Waco, you were in the right place at the right time at the most buoyant and bullish pest control market that I have seen since I've been in the industry since 2003. Right now, I would like to say that Patrick, you and Bobby would be selling for millions of dollars less in 2022 than you did in 2021. Timing these things are very important. And, after when we get done with this today, I'm going to probably kick off a note to our clients, not to the market, just kind of updating our clients as to what's going on, a quick email. Try to keep everyone in focus because I think that 2022 will be a dramatically changing market, and it really doesn't have a whole lot to Ukraine and Russia. I think that's obviously going to impact it, but I'm talking about just economic fundamentals of this post-great financial crisis, monetary disaster we've created, and our chickens are coming home to roost.
Chickens. Love me some
chickens. Chickens are right down there.
As you were talking about valuations, I couldn't help but think about Black Bear in the timing. And when I was asking you to find a scarce asset, like would I have checked, like would Black Bear have checked these boxes? And I think geography was a big part in that. And I'm like, okay, everything you just said, I'm like, I don't know what it would look like. It would have been a totally different outcome.
The most important thing is when you go into a process, you try to position the business, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I say. It really matters what these acquirers want to do. And so when I look at your business, what did I like about it? Well, extremely high recurring revenue. You guys had great profit. You guys were showing year over year growth in the double-digit range. And so you kind of checked all those fundamental pest control boxes. You were in Waco, Texas, which now it's a double-edged sword. So here's what I don't like about Waco. It's in the middle of nowhere, right? It is South Central Texas. It is one of those things where I'm like, But what the acquirers love about Waco is it's a tertiary market. It is growing. So Waco's a net importer of people. You guys have all those stupid like gas stations down there with all the pumps and people come in like Magnolia. I didn't even know I never heard of that until I went there, and you got all these pilgrims coming in from all over the world. I mean, I thought to myself, why the hell am I doing pest control M&A? I should have done some stupid like TV show and had like some home. I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyways, you got people coming there, and it's growing. And you guys were kind of the only game in town from a size perspective. Let's be honest. You had a lot of competitors around there, but your business was the biggest. So I think that it's always a crapshoot because you don't know what these guys think when we go into this. You don't know who's looking at what geography. I got a sense because these guys say, hey, I'm looking in Texas, I'm looking here, I'm looking there. But it's not my job the worst thing I can do is go into a process with preconceived notions. The best thing that I can do is go into a process, take Project Black Bear and say, I don't know what the hell is going to happen. And I don't really care because I am going to get the materials done. I am going to set the right process, and I'm going to kick that thing out into the market, and I'm going to make it as competitive as I can, and I'm going to see what's going to happen. That's all I can do. And I struggle with the Mexican and the rest of the team, and people bitch and moan and call me egghead. But I get the deal done.
Let me go back. I don't know how much you could say about this. Jared Borg, I remember early conversation with Jared, and he listened to the podcast. And we got talking about Microsoft BI, and I was like, what is that, right? And so I don't know how much of that like Thompson Street Capital like owns as far as IP now.
Yeah.
But can you talk about going through that? You talked about his technology and how he stepped it up, and I don't know anyone else that was really had that integrated into their system.
Yeah, it's very rare to run into those types of businesses. And when we talked to Jay Keating, so I sat down with Jay Keating, who is the CEO of Pesco, in this very seat last week, and Jared was here, and we talked a little bit about why Pesco and Thompson Street liked Jared's business, and that was Project Haymarket. So I think we'll hear a little bit about that. Jared, unfortunately, we were running short because we had a dozen people down here in dinner meetings and so on and so forth. But I think, for Jared, he and Kyle kind of took that business to, he never thought for a second he was going to be running a $20+ million pest control business from where they started. They kind of took that to where they thought they could take that. And then it was time to bring in additional resources. And so partnering with somebody like Thompson Street put them in an ecosystem of other mid-market businesses. And Jared talked about it in one of the discussions. I don't remember which one, Len the plumber is really good at media buying. So there's a lot of things that he could potentially learn from the other portfolio companies there. But I think for Jared, at the end of the day, these are always financial transactions. No matter what anyone says, show me the money. And so it had to make sense, and he had to take the proverbial chips off the table, right? Mitigate his risk. So if everything goes to hell in a handbasket, his family's safe. And then he rolled some equity and he's preparing for growth. And so I think it's a great story. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to talk to Jared again. I'd love to get out there into Boise and into his domain and have a chit chat with him. And we're going to certainly sit down with Kyle. Kyle Woodbury, his partner, fantastic guy, was instrumental in helping them build that business. And Kyle hopefully will be down here in PR here in the next couple of months, so we'll sit down with him as well.
So I know I dodge questions. Can you tell me what his Microsoft BI did for him?
Oh, sorry.
Measuring KPIs?
Yeah. So they experimented with a variety of different BI platforms, and they were using Microsoft BI. And I don't even know if that's what they're using now today. What it does is it allows them to determine precisely the KPIs that they want to measure, Net Promoter Score, all those different things, and put them on a dashboard. And they could break it down by individual, by group, by office, by region. So it allows for a lot of granularity. And, I remember Jared was on that thing all the time. And they spent a lot of money building that out. Maybe what we'll do, Patrick, I'm not qualified to really go into the details on what they did. When we talk to Jared, we'll have him if he's willing to share a little bit more of that, I think it'd be a great session.
Speaking of events, you mentioned Unhinged, Aftermath, Supernova, Bubble Trouble?
Bubble Trouble, yes. So last year we did Supernova. If you have not watched it, you should watch it before you come to an event that we're probably going to be doing sometime in early May, give or take. We're not sure exactly how this is all going to work. We want to do it. It's going to be live. We want to film it and broadcast it from Puerto Rico. So we're still sorting out some of the logistics. So more to come on that. If you haven't watched Supernova, you should go on to YouTube. We've got a Boardroom Buzz page. Instead of putting it on Potomac stuff, we're just tossing this thing on the Boardroom Buzz. Type in Supernova in YouTube. Take a look at that because it will give you some context of where we were historically for the last, I don't know, Patrick, 20 years. We're going to look very acutely at this dynamic period between January 1st of 2020 and present. And then we're going to think through where we're going to be at the end of this year. And it's impossible to go any further than that. But that'll be an early May event. But if you have the opportunity, watch Supernova first because I want everyone to have that context because I'm not going to talk about it for the 15th time. We're going to gloss right over that and get into some important things. So yeah, that'll be coming up. Cool. If you want to be on the distribution list, you should go to Potomac, Potomac, pest.com. And there's all sorts of like annoying sign-up boxes that they have put on the website. It says sign up for the commentary. So just put your email address in there and you'll get an invitation when we send that out.
Cool.
Patrick, in closing, we've got another 24 hours of meetings, dinners, and some recording sessions. I would love for you to sign up on YouTube because some of this stuff is just cooler. No one wants to see Patrick and I sitting here, let's be honest. If I could replace him with like a beautiful blonde, I would do it immediately, but I'm kind of stuck with him. But for some of the other stuff, we've got some super cool guests. I have tried to entice our guests, tend to be male, to bring their beautiful wives on the show because they were down here and all the wives are, oh, my hair's not ready. Like I'm going out to the beach. I got sand on my face. But I think the prerequisite going forward is, hey, listen, coming down to PR, your wife gets on the show. So that's what we're going to do. So subscribe to the YouTube channel because what I'm going to tell Dylan is I want to go out first with videos. Like I want to release videos a week or a couple of weeks before we release the audio.
Sounds like a deal. All right. Sorry, I'll grow out my hair.
And with that, until I guess next week, we'll see you here live from San Juan, Puerto Rico.